Alright, so we're going to be solving a system of equations, and eventually this is going to look just like the elimination method. So we're going to start with a word problem. Alright, now, and it can be tricky trying to figure out how those two equations, exactly how they're going to look. So what I want to do to kind of help me organize my two equations is I'm going to make this little t-table here. And the first thing I want to look for is a total. Alright, now I'm dealing with two equations, so I should have two separate totals if I'm looking at this. Now it tells me that there are 22 animals in a barn. Well, that's a total. There's a total of 22 animals. So I know that I have a total of animals, and I'll, up at the top, I'm going to label kind of what that number 22 represents. And if I keep reading, it says some are ducks and some are horses. I don't know how many, but it says there are 68 legs in all. That's another total. There's a total of 68, and that's dealing with legs. Okay, now that's going to help me organize these two equations, starting with those totals. If you look at the animals, I know that I have ducks and I know that I have horses. When you add those two animals together, in total I'm going to have 22. The question's asking me how many of each animal are there. So that's the information that I'm trying to solve. So I don't really have a number to put with that just yet. But when it comes to how many legs does a duck have, well, I know a duck has 2 legs, and I know a horse has 4. So if you add 2 legs that every duck has, plus all the horses, when you add them together, I know every duck has 2 legs, every horse has 4. All together, I'm going to have 68 legs in total. And that is the two equations that I'm going to use. This first equation, d plus h equals 22. Well, d plus h, when you add all the ducks and horses, you get 22. That's an equation. Then when I look at this other equation, 2d plus 4h equals 68. That's my second equation, and I can use those two equations now to figure out how many animals there were in total, because I have the 22 animals, the 68 legs. I just got to figure out how many of those are ducks, how many of those are horses. And now that I have these two equations, I can actually use the elimination method. But you remember, with the elimination method, I need opposites. So I have a 2d that's positive. I would need a negative 2d. So what I would do is I would multiply that top equation by negative 2, and that's going to create a negative 2d. That will cancel that out. But when we eliminate, we have to multiply everything by negative 2. So that's going to give me negative 2h. And then negative 44. Alright, and now that I have opposites, I can just add these two equations together. 2d minus 2d cancels out. 4h minus 2h is 2h. And 68 minus 44 is going to give me 24. Okay, so now I can solve for h by dividing by 2 on both sides. So that tells me that h equals 2 goes into 24 12 times. So now I know h equals 12. In other words, out of those 22 animals, 12 of them were horses. Right, and I can use that information to solve for how many ducks there were. I mean, if there's only 22 animals, I'm just going to subtract the 12 from 22, because what I have is an equation now. And let's just go up here to that original equation. It was d plus h. Well, now it's going to become d plus 12, because we know h is 12 equals 22. So if I'm going to solve that equation, I would just subtract 12 from both sides, and that's going to give me d equals 10. So that is, how many ducks did I have? I had 10. How many horses? 12. So how many of each animal? 10 ducks, 12 horses. And I just had to set up the equations, and the hardest part is getting that information organized. That's why I think it helps to start with a total at the bottom, and I want to look at another example of that. So here again, we have a total of something that we're looking for, and we're talking about someone who's buying writing utensils. I'm going to do the t-table that we did before, so I'm going to kind of create this little chart. And what I want to figure out from that is there a total? Well, it says he bought 4 packs. That's a total. So when we're talking about packs that he purchased, we know that he got 4. Okay, now when we go over to the next total, it says he spent a total of $12. So we know how much money that he's spent. So when we're talking about money that he spent, he spent $12. Now I don't know how many of each pack that he bought. That's what we're trying to figure out. I know that he bought pens, and I know that he bought markers, but I don't know how many. So I'm going to say pens plus markers. Well, in total he bought 4. Now when it comes to price, we do have a price. We know that pens were $4, so it was $4 for pens plus $2 for markers. Altogether he spent $12. So these are the two equations that I would use. P plus M equals 4, and then 4P plus 2M equals 12. And I would just solve those using the elimination method, just like we've been doing. So if I need to get rid of, let's say I try to get rid of 4P, well, I need negative 4P up here. So I'm going to have to multiply this entire equation by negative 4 to create that opposite. Because when I multiply negative 4 times P, I get negative 4P. That creates an opposite. Distribute that to everything. And distribute it here. And that makes negative 16. Okay, so I would just solve this with the elimination method. Those cancel. That gives me negative 2M equals, let's see, 12 minus 16 is negative 4. Alright, so when I solve this, I'm going to divide by negative 2, and I'm going to end up getting M equals 2. Okay, so I know that he bought 2 markers. Well, if he bought 4 total, obviously he bought 2 pens. Okay, so there were only 4 items. 2 of them were markers. The other 2 are going to be pens. And if you ever get a question that you can't just outright see it right away without working it out, some of the numbers might be a little harder to deal with. We know that P plus M, well, we now know M is 2, gave us 4. I can just set up the equation and use the information, subtract 2 from both sides. That's going to give me P equals 2. So I can use that equation if you need to. Numbers like this are pretty easy to see what it would be. Now this question is off of the Unit 3 quiz. Now when it comes to inequalities, you want to look for keywords. Now I have 2 equations here. It says a teacher wants to buy at least 24 t-shirts. When you're talking about at least, it could be that number, but that's the least it could be. So we're talking about something being greater than or equal to 24. So whatever the scenario is, I'm talking about at least. It can be that number, but it could be more than that. And then over here it says she wants to spend no more than $300. So if you have a limit, that's the highest you can go. So however much I spend, alright, that amount needs to be less than or equal to $300. If you're on a budget and you can't spend over that, so you're talking about money spent, okay, it can't be more than $300. Now they give us the prices up here. They tell us that t-shirts X cost $16 each. Then you got that's the long sleeve, and then the short sleeves are $10. So I know that 16X plus 10Y, whatever I spend, and that's what that is right here. This is how much I spend. I want it to be less than or equal to $300. Okay. Now I want how many I buy though, and that's just the X and the Y. How many shirts am I going to buy? Well, X plus Y, I want that to be greater than or equal to 24. I don't want to go over 24. I don't want to go under 24 shirts. So the total shirts that I buy, I want that to be more. I want it to be more than or equal to 24. That's the lowest I can go. So I'm looking for the inequality to match. And if it's multiple choice, if you see the word at least, then you know you're looking for something that has a line under it. So right off the bat, I could say it could either be this one or this one, and then just look at the numbers, the inequalities, to see which ones actually make sense. Okay, we want it to say greater than or equal to 24. We want it to say less than or equal to 300.